Hello my friends, operator Starsky here, and today we're gonna talk about what happens if Ukraine is defeated, and specifically what happens to your country if Ukraine is defeated. As of today, there's absolutely no way for Russia to defeat Ukraine for several reasons. First of all, they've already lost more territories than were captured previously, including whole north of Ukraine and Kharkiv and Kherson Oblast, and their daily progress looks very miserable. The sanctions don't let them build new missiles, that's why they cannot conduct daily or weekly missile strikes like they did before, and generally the military potential of Russia is decreasing every single day. You also those video reports, those daily updates showing hundreds and hundreds of Russian soldiers killed in Ukraine on a daily basis. At the same time, the military potential of Ukraine is growing. We're talking about new tanks, new weapons, and all that. The only military resource the Russians have at this point that cannot be depleted, basically, is their manpower, because the Russians brought enormous number of personnel, approximately 400,000 men. But at the same time, the Ukrainians have quite a few long-range artillery systems, including HIMARS, as well as other Western weaponry, even though the wars are fought with men. But the machines are used to eliminate those men, and until we have the machines and we have shells to feed those machines, Russian infantry will not be effective, even though there's a lot of them. Those men will keep being eliminated on a daily basis in hundreds and thousands, because the Russian machines used by the Russian troops are no match to the long-range high-precision artillery used by the Ukrainians. And also, let's keep in mind that it's a defensive warfare. Our main task as of today is literally eliminating as much Russian personnel as possible on a daily basis. And yes, we can do it. Therefore, the goal for the Russian terrorists and their leaders is to make Ukraine stop defending itself, cutting the weapon supplies from the allied countries. And basically, every time you see those people with Russian flags in your country saying that they want peace, they want to stop Ukraine from being supplied with weapons, they want to avoid the escalation before it's too late. What they really mean is that they want Ukrainians to finally die. And when asked, they will give you 1,000 justifications on why the Ukrainians should die. Basically everything that they've learned from the Russian media. Nazi, biolabs, dirty bombs, Satanism, America-sponsored coup, and of course, Ukraine is not even a nation. We never existed. Ergo, we have no right to exist. Also, the same people usually oppose NATO for the obvious reason, because NATO is the only military force capable of defending the civilized world from the Russian world domination, and that's why they hate it. All that, my friends, is an informational element of the so-called hybrid war, developed and cherished by the Russians around 1990s. What is a hybrid warfare? From the history of mankind, we know about epic or heroic wars, feudal wars, religious wars, ideological wars like class wars, then the Cold War. So the hybrid war is a development of the Cold War. It was described for the first time in the study of Frank Hoffman in 2007, called Conflict in the 21st Century. It's a complex of military, diplomatic, political, economical, ideological, and informational measures used as a weapon, used by a single coordination center controlling both regular armed forces and irregular forces like criminals, separatists, or terrorists. Those are used to disguise the aggressor's involvement into conflict. Take Moldova, early 90s, the Transnistrian separatists controlled by Russia. Take Georgia, 1992, the Abkhazian separatists controlled by Russia. Chechnya, 1994, the so-called opposition, consisting mainly of the Russian regular troops. Georgia, 2008, the South Ossetian separatists controlled by Russia. And all the way to Ukraine, 2014, the Donetsk and Luhansk separatists controlled by Russia and led by the native Russian citizens such as Strelkov, Pavlov, Borodai, Mamiev, and others. Two key features of the hybrid warfare. First, the military tasks are completely subordinate to the political and informational goals, not vice versa. And second, the psyops and propaganda are key factors used to shape the public opinion. How does it work? Typical methods used to wage the hybrid warfare are following. Financing and conducting the state terrorism, like repressing the human rights, like intimidating the oppositioners, false flag operations with massive number of civilian casualties, and so on. Supporting the local separatism, establishing the artificial pseudo-republics, weaponizing, supplying, and training the irregular combat forces, like separatists or terrorist groups, broadly involving hackers to influence vulnerable processes of the attacked state, like online elections, financing and supporting extremist, far-left, far-right organizations, as well as bloggers, public influencers. And a very important one, keeping the population in a constant fear for its life and well-being. Combinations of those methods are broadly implemented by such organizations as ISIS, formerly known as Al-Qaeda, Hezbollah, Taliban, and internationally recognized terrorist regimes in Iran, North Korea, and Russian Federation, of course. Let's imagine that Ukraine lost its international support and the Russians managed to completely occupy the country, arresting and eliminating hundreds of thousands of people and erasing the Ukrainian identity, like they already did to us back in 1921. It's when the Ukrainian People's Republic was invaded and enslaved by the Bolshevik Russia. What happens next to your country? First of all, regardless of whether your country is a member of NATO, like Germany, or a separate country like Bosnia, regardless if you are a bordering state like Finland or Estonia, or a distant country like the US or the UK, the hybrid warfare will involve a complex of informational operations launched against your democratic government. A bunch of movements will emerge. That will include an oppressed social group. In Finland and Estonia, you will see local Russian population oppressed and abused by the local legislation that requires them to learn the language of the country they live in. In Germany or the US, it will be a different group of people oppressed and repressed by the Nazi militarist regime. It depends on your very own local specifics. People who are not paid, people who are discriminated, people who are unhappy for any reason you can imagine, because there are always unhappy people in any country, regardless if there's a reason for that or not. Those people will start being united into movements. And it's a normal thing because in a democratic world, it's normal to unite into groups to protect our rights. This is what we do in a civilized society, right? And of course, it will be ridiculous to blame such movements for working for Kremlin. But the Kremlin that wholeheartedly despises democracy will use the democratic values to exploit democracy, sometimes bringing the situation to a level of a total absurd. Fact is, those unhappy people will never know about being used. And the Russian analytics will check out those groups. They will find the one that fits, infiltrate it, and use it just like that. That's a typical pragmatic military approach to solving things. Then you will probably see a bunch of radical movements throwing Nazi salutes on camera. And they shouldn't be numerous, just enough to make 1 million pictures and videos of them that will be used later in the Russian propaganda to blame that your government is Nazi. Then you will see a rise of political parties sharing some beautiful ideas, like ideas of the global peace, stripping the world of armies and weapons, protecting the rights of oppressed and minorities. And they will be completely legit. Believe me, they will be totally nice and attractive. And of course, there will be nobody waving the idea of an FSB spy or something like that, or speaking with a suspicious accent. You won't see that. It's ridiculous. People don't know it, but all of the secret services share the same feature. In most cases, when you're hired by one, you will not even be aware of that. Next, you will see the rise of the major conflict in your country. And of course, you can expect a terrorist act. Of course, you can expect a terrorist act of some kind. And its target will be selected depending on your very own national features. Something or someone will be sacrificed to fuel the social unrest and create some kind of resistance between the social groups. After that, there will be two ways for the situation to develop. If your country is not a NATO member, please accept my deepest condolences in advance, because the Russian peacekeepers wearing blue helmets and patches of the peacekeeping troops, authorized by the mandate of the United Nations, will bomb the living crap out of your country. And the United Nations itself will not be able to do anything. If you want to know what happens next, take a look at Georgia, Chechnya, Syria, Kazakhstan, and of course Ukraine. Please have no illusions, because the Russian peacekeepers and liberators will do all kinds of atrocities that you don't even want to think of. There were no cases they were not doing them in history. If your country is a NATO member, you should expect at least a referenda for canceling the NATO membership. Imagine Germany or Czech Republic flooded with massive protests against NATO. Let's say in Poland, just for example, arises a movement of Podlasian People's Republic bordering Belarus, and they always considered themselves native Podlasians with Russian or Belarusian roots and rich history dating back to 2005. They stormed the police stations and town halls, installing some crazy flags and burning Polish flags, and proclaim an independent republic. With Russia and Belarus, of course, being their closest allies, because we all know that the biggest mission of Russia is protecting the oppressed minorities, and I'm opening quotes here, because they don't care about the starving Altai, because as soon as oppressed people or People's Republic emerges on Earth, they will do all they can to save those people from suffering. And those people, by the way, they were killed in big numbers in Poland by Polish militarists and burned alive in American and Polish biolabs. I'm closing quotes here. So the bullshit like this will undoubtedly surprise not only the common Polish people, but also the citizens of Podlyassia, who lived there all their life without even realizing that they were a separate nation. Exactly like it happened in Ukrainian Donbass. Exactly like that. Actually, the Donbass separatists in Ukraine, they felt betrayed by Putin because in 2014 they were promised to get annexed like the Crimea and become the part of the Russian Federation. But Putin lacked the willpower to accomplish that. That's why they were told, yes, you are Russians, but you are the Donbassian Russians, a separate ethnicity. So a lot of them were like, what the heck? Why you cannot just call us the Russian Russians and accept as your people? And they were told, no, we cannot do that, at least not for now. You gotta keep living in your own unrecognized republic, and we will just station 30,000 men with tanks on your territory, wearing no patches. Now you may ask yourself, why should Russia even invade us? Because that's exactly what the Putin's puppet ex-president Medvedev is talking all his life, because it's exactly what the Russian media are talking about on the Russian national television, because the Russian social media are full of calls to destroy those fascist countries that the USSR didn't do after the end of the World War II. And by fascist countries, they mean the former allies of the USSR, like the US or the UK. NATO is a Nazi alliance in the Russian mind. I made a separate video dedicated to this. It's a long topic, but the fact is, you're trying to understand the criminal from a standpoint of a lawful person. And it's not like they really need a reason to hate you. So how to recognize the signs of the Russian hybrid warfare in my country? First of all, you should check what the Russian media are saying about your country. What's the narratives directed towards their internal audience? And at this point, you probably want to say, dude, you're exaggerating. If I don't support my government, does it make me a Russian spy? It's ridiculous. Not supporting your government doesn't mean you are a Russian agent. It only means that you are a perfect target audience for the Russian psyops. And I give you 100% that at least some portion of your daily news found on your favorite news resources is created or affiliated with the Russian psyops. The reason for that is because you are inhabiting the same information space that is inhabited and used by Kremlin. And the only goal of Russian propaganda is to destroy democracy in your country, nothing else. But then you can say, but how about the freedom of thought and freedom of speech? I have my own opinion, and I won't just blindly follow the Western pro-Ukrainian media. I want to listen to both sides. Then I will ask you, how do you think, does the Russian government, ruled by the same person for decades, does it respect the democracy and the freedom of speech? And if the answer is no, then what makes you think that the national media in a country where people are thrown into jail for having their own opinion or killed, what makes you think that those media will be bringing you the truth? My name is Operator Starsky. Thanks for watching.